Okay, so ReDawn by Bredon Sanderson and Janci Patterson. And if you listen to this on Audible, read by Susie Jackson. Fittingly for a sci-fi series, a lot of suns. Anyway, this is the second novella in Bredon Sanderson's Skyward series. And I don't think I've really talked about this series much before, mostly just because I don't really love it, but I don't really hate it, so I don't really have anything I can say against or for it. I do find some elements of the world building to be kind of annoying, but it's kind of just like this type of thing that annoys me and only me. Like, okay, so in this book, actually, they make mention that one of the groups of aliens have it where their grandparents raised the children, not the actual parents. That makes no sense when you compare it to things like the selfish gene idea and parental investment theory, but that's again something that annoys me and only me. I see why this series is well liked, especially by people who only read Bredon Sanderson books, which is not an insignificant portion of people. But for me, I run into the problem that I don't think this series is as compelling as something like Vada's War, which I really need to do a review about at some point, or has as engaging of characterization as something like Expeditionary Force, which I should probably review most of those books as well. In any case, the main reason I never really cared for Skyward is I never really liked the villains. To put it in the simplest possible way, they're an evil empire that instead of being an Empyrean of Man style go slaughter all Xenos type, they're just incredibly passive-aggressive. So take like all the hyper-violent shit you would imagine done by the Dune guy and imagine his passive-aggressive girlfriend. That's what the superiority end up being. And it's kind of annoying that they don't seem to realize that that aggression is aggression, even if it's just passive aggression. And I'm amazed that no biologist in this entire empire has pointed this out, as this is not a uniquely human trait, and we can point to this type of thing existing in nature in our world, so the idea that it doesn't exist in this empire is strains credulity. I guess it's possible, but it's really unlikely. I don't find them all that intimidating so much as I'm annoyed by them. That said, I really like this novella. ReDawn is probably my favorite story in this series, and part of that has to do with just the simple perspective. Instead of being based around a human protagonist, this book takes from the point of view of the character of Alanik. I don't remember the name of the race that she was technically a part of. The planet is called ReDawn, obviously, but the race is essentially space elves, and literally lampshaded in the series that they're essentially elves. There's a line about how an author from Earth history wrote down their language, and when humans and the whatever they were called meet, some of them were able to talk to each other, and only hint we get about what author that is and what book was, quote, something about a ring. So they're essentially elves. But the simple fact that we're watching this from the perspective of not humans, but humans' closest allies, makes this story a lot more interesting to me. Just her having to navigate human social customs while not really having anything to go by but propaganda and the few stories that are still laid down. How I understand the occupation of ReDawn from the superiority, probably not dissimilar to how the Philippines felt about the United States in World War II. It's like, oh God, we really don't want humans to come back. That'd sure be terrible. No, oh thank God they're back. That's the general feeling I get from the denizens of ReDawn. And as such, it's interesting to watch her look at these things, like parse out what is the fact from the fiction about human beings. What are they really like? Are they this hyper-aggressive species that the superiority make them out to be, or are they this more noble thing that influences their ancient myths? That's an influence for a lot of their ancient myths that they quote treasure, which, I kind of want to read those now that I think about it. Yeah, I really liked this novella over anything else in this series, and it boils down simply to this change in perspective. It's super common in fantasy to see of different fantasy races, so, you'll have the Dritz books are all about the Dark Elf's position on everything, or there's a few dwarven protagonists you might read, or whatever your, in-world equivalent of those things it tends to be, because despite the fact that a lot of authors don't want to say they're doing elves, a lot of the time they're doing elves.
Elves are back.
But in sci-fi, this is really uncommon. The only series I can really think of to do this much is Star Wars, but even that has a lot more fantastical elements to it. So yeah, I really liked ReDawn. It just goes to show you that you can have a relatively well-worn formula, but if you just change the perspective on it, that can really refresh a well-worn story idea. So, yeah.
The reason I don't watch a lot of conservative news, well, I do watch it, but I feel like the way they present information is so aggressive.
Hello, friends. My name is JJ. So